A deep crisis is hollowing out the ranks of American military veterans and first responders, driven by severe PTSD and opiate addiction. For many patients, the path to dependency began with legally prescribed pharmaceuticals. Instead of curing the underlying trauma, these powerful opioids often created a secondary chemical trap that traditional medicine has struggled to resolve. This systemic failure has left thousands of patients in a desperate vacuum, cut off from effective support and left with no viable legal options for recovery. To survive, many former service members have had to abandon the American medical establishment entirely, forming an underground diaspora to find help. This search for help has created a quiet pipeline to the south, where veterans cross the border into Mexico to check into clandestine clinics in Tijuana. They are risking everything for a radical and expensive treatment involving a heavily restricted psychedelic plant extract called Ibogaine. Possessing this substance is a felony in the United States, yet the success rates of these underground trips have begun to trigger a sudden, high-stakes policy reversal at the highest levels of government. Desperate veterans have effectively crowdsourced a medical breakthrough, creating a groundswell of recovery stories that is now pressuring federal agencies to look at treatments they ignored for 50 years. Ibogaine comes from the root bark of an African shrub, and it is far from a recreational experience. The process is physically grueling. Patients endure hours of severe physiological stress, vomiting, and cardiovascular strain that requires constant monitoring by medical professionals. Psychologically, users undergo a hyper-detailed life review. It forces them to confront the root causes of trauma with an intensity many call meeting the devil. While the patient faces their past, the compound initiates a deep neurological reset. It physically enters the brain, blocking specific pathways that maintain chemical addiction. This reset is so precise, it can instantly shut off the acute physical withdrawal symptoms of severe opiate dependency. The cure works because of this brutal paradox. It stops the disease by forcing the patient through a terrifying, heavily monitored ordeal. Given this clinical effectiveness, Ibogaine's status as a strictly banned contraband drug in the United States is a direct contradiction of its potential benefits. The ban originated in the 1970s with the Nixon administration's Controlled Substances Act, which placed the plant in the most restrictive legal category. Nixon's administration used these new drug classifications to target the anti-war and civil rights movements, prioritizing the suppression of political rivals over clinical research. Labeling Ibogaine as Schedule 1 meant the government officially recognized zero medical benefit, a designation it shares with no other substance, even those as destructive as alcohol. The 50-year barrier against Ibogaine is the result of that political legacy, rather than any modern scientific consensus. That political barrier is finally breaking. Survival stories from Mexico are reaching millions through massive media platforms, making the success of the treatment impossible for the public to ignore. In Texas, the state government has already committed $100 million to study Ibogaine for its police officers and soldiers, marking the first major institutional crack in the ban. The movement eventually reached the Oval Office, resulting in an executive order to fast-track and reclassify psychedelic treatments for mental health. Years of veteran advocacy have successfully bypassed the slow-moving FDA pipeline, forcing a top-down change in federal drug policy. The future model for this treatment looks like a regulated medical system, where pure compounds are administered in a safe environment by trained doctors. This shift allows society to move past the drug war stigmas of the 1970s and look at these plants through a scientific lens. By pulling these treatments from the underground into the clinical mainstream, we are unlocking a tool that could definitively turn the tide in the addiction crisis.